Why?
I have it. This is the it's the most ridiculous thing ever. I don't know if you can even see it very well.
Hmm.
I'm gonna get. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk to you about algebra. Just kidding. We're going to talk about books.
Yeah. So yeah, mom and dad got these for me actually because I love Hercule Poirot so much.
No.
I know. I just set up a dedicated like stand for it, so um, which in fact we have the TV show, and then I love I think it well I don't know if Borders was actually putting these out, but they were. I got a lot of these from Borders, so you know how old that is. And I haven't seen these particular editions.
For those of you who are very young, Borders used to be a bookstore chain, but went out of business.
Yeah, which is a shame. I loved Borders. I still miss Borders. But Barnes and Noble has their Criterion collection sale every July and November, and Arrow Video. So if you want to get specialty movies at $20 prices. So yeah, I figured we'd talk about Agatha Christie and then Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I got my little Sherlock Holmes statue here.
How many books total are we going to be reviewing today?
I just thought we would talk about style in general and then just kind of like, I don't know, I just thought we'd leapfrog instead of doing like how we have been where we have like, a few books to discuss. Especially because like, I mean, I've read all of these books that are on the table at least once. I've read some of them more than once.
Cut the cards.
Okay. I read the entire Perot series in high school.
How many do we each get?
I don't know. I guess we can just decide. You want to do like?
Well, we'll just do 7. It's a lucky number.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. But yeah, I love the rainbow spines of these books. I've been.
It does look nice.
Yeah, the Iliad, which is a used bookstore over by us, has had a few of them, and I got them immediately. But I hadn't been able to find Death on the Nile, which is coming out as a major motion picture now.
Who goes first?
Either way, you want to go first?
Sure.
But I found it in this nice hardcover with some of her other most famous novels. So I guess we should talk about just kind of the basics, since I guess not everybody will be familiar with Agatha Christie. I think most people will be familiar with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle because of Sherlock Holmes. I would say that Agatha Christie is probably the next generation of mystery writers, and she was really famous in her lifetime. And I suppose the Kenneth Branagh movies are kind of putting her back into prominence. Not that I particularly care for them, but I also didn't like the some of the movies made in her lifetime that had Perot in them. So but I love the BBC the series. So.
Oh yeah. For anybody who hasn't seen it, I recommend it. It's pretty good, and it's coming from somebody who had no knowledge of Agatha Christie before I met this guy.
But yeah, Agatha Christie wrote like almost 90 books, and I've read a good number of them because I think 40 something of them are.
She wrote 90 books?
Oh yeah, yeah. She wrote, I mean, these are so short though. Like she churned out like 1 or 2 of them a year. Like literally, she. Well, I guess might as well start at the beginning. She was a poisons dispensary during World War One, so she was a battlefield nurse. And when I say poisons dispensary, like she would be considered in a modern an anesthesiologist, but they used to call it a poisons dispensary because she's administering, morphine and like all that good stuff that if you give an overdose, someone could die. Um, so poison comes up a lot in her plots because of that, because she knows, like she knows the accurate, all the poison stuff is accurate. And in those days, there was a lot more poisons in households. Like people were using. So like okay, so
Like arsenic was a common one, wasn't it?
arsenic was a common one because that was rat poison, and then sleeping drafts. So like you sometimes you can get sleeping pills now. They didn't used to come in pill forms. They used to be like in the powders, and you just dosed yourself, mixing it in water, and if you took too much of it, that was lethal. So literally, there were just way more poisons in the household than there are now. And so she used that to really great effect. It's kind of funny. There's so it's not Agatha Christie, but it's Agatha Christie inspired. There's a movie by Robert Altman who did MASH and Nashville and a lot of other movies. He made a movie in the early 2000s called Gosford's Park, which is a commentary on Agatha Christie. I thought I put down.
Oh,
yeah,
you did.
Yeah, I put down.
I was like, why is he taking so long?
I was thinking that about you. Okay. And Gosford Park is.
Oh no.
Ooh. Gosford Park is interesting.
Oh no.
Gosford Park is interesting because they're.
Oh no.
Okay, you can stop saying it.
I'm sorry. I don't play this very often.
Well, no, now it's distracting, but.
Fine, I'll never talk again.
Okay. Shit, I don't have any hearts. Okay.
I'm getting really lucky with these cards.
Yeah. Well, so Gosford Park is interesting because in like every room they have, they'll have like a thing that's marked poison.
I had to say something.
So like there's like just shoe polish in one room and that's marked poison, and it's just fun. It's a little nod to like how many household poisons there were in that age. Okay, I mean, so we've mentioned Perot a lot, but for those of you who don't know about the character or only know the Kenneth Branagh version, it was my turn, right?
Yeah.
So Hercule Poirot is a Belgian detective. He's based on Agatha Christie. When she was home during the war, happened to see a Belgian refugee who looked like Poirot. She stole his physical description from this guy she saw walking down the street, and she just kind of started thinking about him. It was like, what does this guy do? And she decided he was a detective. And the rest is history. She put out her first novel, which is right here, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, in 1920. And she put out her last Poirot novel in 1976, Curtain. And it's funny because she said at the time, she's like, I wish I hadn't made him so old to start with, because she pictured him as like in his 50s to start. I mean, like he's a retired. He used to be in the Belgian police force, so like he's a retired detective. So like he's got to be getting up there in years, like. But she wrote about him for 56 years, so by the end you're just like, He's got to be over 100, right?
Well, that's
No.
that's the wonderful thing about fiction is the characters don't age.
Yeah. Well, when they decided to adapt the show for the BBC, I won.
Yay.
When they decided to adapt the show for the BBC, which then aired on like PBS and A&E in the United States, they decided to set it all in like the 20s, 30s, and early 40s. So it all ends before like. Well, I guess war had already been declared. I don't remember if they actually. I think they had like one episode where like they actually acknowledged the war happening, but most of it is like set in that like period, and so and it really works for it because I feel like the 20s and 30s are the like big heyday for Agatha Christie. She wrote a lot of her like major masterpieces in that time period. I mean, she had some out of that, but like Death on the Nile, Murder on the Orient Express, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, those are all early in her career. And then I think she got another resurgence in the 50s when they started adapting her work to the screen. Which one of my favorites is Witness for the Prosecution, which doesn't have Hercule Poirot in it. But we watched the Billy Wilder film adaptation.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. And is in fact in this Masterpieces of Murder one.
You know, I think the very first episode of Pro you ever showed me was the one that takes place. Wasn't it like the discovery of King Tut's tomb or something?
Oh, I think you're thinking of the Adventure of the Egyptian Tomb.
That was it.
It's a fictional. Pharaoh. She actually wrote that one before she had ever been to Egypt. So.
Did she write that before or after the discovery of his tomb?
I'm not 100%. So she started publishing in 1920. The tomb was discovered in 22, so probably it was after. I would imagine, but it's possible. I mean, that was late phase Egypt mania, so like probably it was because of King Tut's tomb. But she ended up going to Egypt. Should I put down for a start, why don't we do it like this?
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like that.
All right.
So she married her husband straight out of the war, and they had a daughter together, and then he cheated on her with his secretary and decided he was going to leave her for the secretary. So then she vanished for I think like 12 days. And much was made about that at the time.
Yeah, I think we both talked about how Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he actually sought the help of a medium to try to track her down.
Yeah, they touched her glove. It's funny because in reality, like we know what happened. I put down the 9. Like it's kind of an open and shut case. I'm putting out a play later this year. Well, it's a staged reading, but one of the segments of it has Agatha Christie during her missing days, and I did a little bit of research and was like, oh, this is not so mysterious, but kind of upsetting. So she didn't write about it in her autobiography, but she has another book that is one of the ones she wrote under her Mary Westmacott pseudonym. She published 8 or 9 romance novels under the pseudonym Mary Westmacott, which I haven't read any of those. But I happened to find one, and I was like, oh, this one's about her missing days. So, in essence, she was going to go kill herself. She was going to drive her car off of the cliff and then swerved at the last moment, and then ultimately decided she didn't want to leave her daughter behind.
Hmm.
She didn't want to do that to her, and so she went and got drunk in a hotel for a while, and that's what happened. And then eventually she decided she was okay enough to come back. Like that was what happened. And it's just so funny that people like are still. They love to do this thing where Agatha Christie solves a murder on during her missing days, which I understand the impulse, but I'm like, we already know what happened during it. I did like an hour of internet research and figured it out. Like, so yeah. I just I loved Agatha Christie for a long time. I mean, I made fan fiction of Poirot in high school, in my TV classes, which you can watch on my YouTube. They have very few views. um, but it's
Yeah,
fun.
check it out if you have time.
This is mostly a joke. I don't really care, but it was funny though, because in high school, people would come up to me and be like, "I saw you on TV in the you had a mustache." Oh yeah, Hercule Poirot has a great big mustache. He's a bigger gentleman. Um, and I think that describes him very well. He is a gentleman. Um, he comforts people who need it, and gives them sound advice that they often don't take. Um, he is slow to anger, brilliant, and sometimes decides, you know what? I'm going to talk you into killing yourself because you're a fucking murderer. He does that way more often than you would think. I don't remember whose birthday it was, but one of my grade school friends was having a birthday party, and she gave out these like little like hardcover children's abridged versions of like famous works, and one of them that I got was Sherlock Holmes stories. It was some of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which is the first collection.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most famous. I mean, I think the most famous Sherlock Holmes stories are out of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and then the novel The Hound of the Baskervilles. There's a few other ones like The Final Problem, but yeah, I loved those, and so then I ended up switching to the actual stories, and read those. And then in 7th grade, our favorite teacher in grade school, sorry, other teachers, we know, but Miss Miller, she had us read this book of detective stories, and and one of them was The Adventure of the Egyptian Tomb, which is your first episode of Perot, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that one. That was my favorite story in that collection. And so then she showed us the TV series, the episode of Death on the Nile, and I loved that. I was very excited. I just started reading Agatha Christie after that. My first novel was Murder in Mesopotamia. I think I just asked for those for Christmas, and I got I remember getting one of these hardcovers, and then I had a little bit of OCD with that, so then I was getting all of them. Oh. Perfect. But yeah, so basically since 7th grade, no,
Interesting.
I've been pretty obsessed with Agatha Christie. And now I got to write that segment that's actually about her in 20th century art, which we're hoping to put up a live stream so you guys at home might be able to watch it. I mean, people in LA can come watch it in person if they want. It's going to be sometime in June. I'm going to have some of my hot chocolate because Perot, he loves his chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entire story, which is a backstory story, in which Perot solves the mystery because someone put the wrong. There's two different colors, so there's two different chocolate boxes, one that's green and one that's pink, and they put the wrong lid on the wrong box.
I remember that episode.
Yeah, it's the short story of the chocolate box. It's set in Belgium. It's like it's like a flashback one because he's telling it to Hastings. It's like one of his career as a police officer. Who knows? But yeah, I've loved Sherlock and Hercule Poirot for so long. Like they've been some of my favorite characters, and I have Sherlock as a character in the novel that I'm currently writing, and then Poirot is going to be a character in the next one because both characters are now in the public domain. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because like Agatha Christie is almost a cliche at this point, like in some ways, because she basically she took the mystery subgenre and invented a lot of the components of it that are like standard today. So
What are some examples?
okay, so the lounge sequence where the detective gathers the suspects together and explains how the crime was committed. And nice. And brings out the last bit of final suspense. She also, her structure is always very interesting. So Doyle, in his Sherlock Holmes, he was a big influence on her. His mysteries, you can't solve them. I mean, for the most part, there's a few that you can, but like most of them are like, oh hey, it was this random guy that we've never met, but like we were able to find him because I knew the chemical compound of the cigarette. Of the cigarette ash that was at this spot or something, like the Sherlock Holmes stories are not so much like about solving the mystery, I feel like. I mean, some of them are, like Hound of the Baskervilles, you can solve that one. The Speckled Band, you can solve that one. But like there's a story called The Blue Carbuncle where this guy comes to Sherlock and is like, we got our Christmas goose and we baked it, and inside we found a sapphire. We don't know how it got there, and so Sherlock like basically follows the trail to figure out how this blue carbuncle got in the goose, finds the guy who stole it, and because it's a Christmas story, it's like, I'm not going to send you to jail because if I sent you to jail, you would be a criminal for life. But I think if I show you mercy, you're going to steer clear of the law. You're gonna be a good person. There's a lot of stories like that where it's like, hey, a weird thing happened. Can you like figure out what's going on? and a lot of those you really can't solve. They're great stories. Like I really enjoy them, but Agatha Christie took that sort of idea where like something kind of crazy's happened. First off, she almost always has it be a murder. It's usually not anything else. Whereas with Sherlock, it's usually something weird comes up. Like I was being paid to go and sit at this redheaded league, and then they stopped paying me. What's up with that? Can you investigate that? Whereas Poirot and all of Agatha Christie's stories are somebody has died, and for one reason or another, they have a bunch of people around them who might have done it. Whether it be by, like, you know, Murder on the Orient Express, where, like, a man is murdered in his compartment aboard a train. The only people who could have done it are the other people who are aboard that train car, because they're the only ones who had access. But theoretically, none of them know him. You know, they were just traveling on a train together. Or it's like Hercule Poirot's Christmas, which is an episode that I love. And the book is pretty good. I think the episode is better, but
yeah, we watched that over the Christmas
yeah, we watched
break.
that over Christmas. But so in that one, the murder victim is this Ian's home. Hello. Hello. We're filming a book review. Okay. Welcome back.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. That's up to you if you want to cut
That's
that out, I guess.
That's our roommate. we'll see later.
Yeah. And so
maybe we'll leave it in. I like spontaneous.
yeah, might
moments.
as well. So in Hercule Poirot's Christmas, the situation is different, but I think it's kind of the epitome of the other side of the coin. So rather than by like circumstance of only this group of people could have killed this person because of their proximity, in Hercule Poirot's Christmas, it's more this guy's an asshole and his entire family wanted to kill him, but which one of them did it?
Mhm.
And I feel like that's kind of the two like sides of Agatha Christie. If you had to like cut it up like that, is she constructs a puzzle in which one of those two situations is at hand. Either it's a locked room sort of scenario in which only a few people could have committed the crime, or there's just so many people who wanted to do the deed that we don't know which one actually did it. And then she really likes to play with human nature, and all of the stories are solvable. I mean, like, there's usually like clues too, but if you kind of figure, okay, in her better ones, there's some where like it's only the clues, but in her better ones, the characters are more fully formed. And if you pay attention to their psychology, you can figure out which one would have been more likely to do it than the others. She has one that I really like that I just bought again because I ended up giving my copy of Cards on the Table to my great aunt and uncle, and it went missing in their pile of books after they passed. But yeah, I just got another copy of Cards on the Table, which is one of my favorites, and that one is really interesting because it's sort of the locked room scenario of the two. So there's this guy, Mr. Shayatana, and he collects murders. And Poirot's like, "What do you mean by that?" And he's like, "I collect murderers who got away with it. Come over to my house. It'll be great. We'll have a dinner party." And so he invites 4 detectives and 4 murderers, and then sets them going in 2 different games of bridge in 2 different rooms. And then he goes to sleep. He at dinner he says, "Hey, I'm gonna make a big announcement at some point after dinner. Don't worry though, it's like nothing about like any murders you guys might have committed or anything. Don't worry about that." Then he sets them going in 2 different bridge rooms. One game is the detectives, and one game is the murderers. And he goes to sleep by the fire in the murderer's room and is stabbed to death. So which one of the 4 of them did it?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's all psychology.
What I love about Perot, though, is that he notices just little elements that most people would overlook, and that's how he's able to solve the crimes.
Yeah, I love his little quirks. Because speaking of OCD, I mean, like he kind of has a lot of that.
Comes in handy with solving crimes, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally a mysterious affair at Styles. There's a major plot point is that he straightens the items on the mantelpiece, and then someone rips up the will and puts it in an item on the mantelpiece, and so unstraightens it, and so then Perot straightens it again later, and then realizes after, oh, but I had straightened it before. So then they find the will in there because he remembers that he had previously straightened the mantle, so someone must have touched it.
I was just curious. What does Agatha Christie tell us about Perot's backstory?
Not too much. He was a police detective. I don't remember what rank he got to in the Belgian police force. He had some renown there. And Captain Hastings and he met in Belgium at some point during the war. He might have met Jap back then too. I'm not entirely sure. As far as we know, he never had like any real romantic relationships. I mean, he has the Countess Russikov, which is they had her mentioned in the BBC version of Murder in Mesopotamia. Want me to go first? Or you?
Well, I put the card down, so you can go ahead.
Okay. And I guess like she's kind of his Irene Adler. Do you remember the Robert Downey Jr. version of Sherlock Holmes?
Yes.
Rachel McAdams' character.
Okay.
So Irene Adler in the Sherlock Holmes canon, she's the one criminal that got away.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sherlock is in love with her. It's kind of the same thing with Perot. The Countess Russikov actually shows up more than Irene Adler does, because Irene Adler is only in one story. But the Countess Russikov shows up in at least 2. But there's also a lot more Perot books and stories than there are Sherlock Holmes stories, at least by Conan Doyle. Obviously,
wrong one.
Obviously, Sherlock Holmes has been in the public domain for a long time, so there's a lot more. There's a lot more fanfic, essentially, of Sherlock Holmes than there is Perot Uno.
Nice.
Yeah. Perot only recently came into the public domain along with The Great Gatsby. I'm not sure if Miss Marple is in the public domain.
You know, is that the reason why we don't? There seems to be more. Okay, let me start over. Like Sherlock Holmes, he's like obviously a big part of pop culture, but Perot, you don't really hear from that much. Is it because of the copyrights and stuff?
I think it's because of the copyright and just Sherlock Holmes was a bigger deal in the United States than Hercule Poirot was. Hercule Poirot was a big deal in Britain, but I don't think he was as big a deal after Christie died in the United States. I mean, because they did have 3 major motion pictures with Peter Ustinov of Poirot, which I don't particularly care for his performance as Poirot. And I realized what it was about it because Death on the Nile, the Peter Ustinov version, went on Criterion Channel last month, and I watched it, and I was like, I can finally articulate what is wrong with his performance. So Peter Ustinov, and those movies in general, are clearly based on the stage versions of Agatha Christie's novels, because she did a lot of adaptations for the stage. And those were very successful in her lifetime. So they've clearly based their screenplays on the stage play texts. And Death on the Nile especially, I was like, this feels like a filmed stage play, even though it's not. And everybody is acting as though they would on a stage, which doesn't work for me because it's not a stage play. If you gave me those exact same performances in a theater, I think I would be fine with it. But because they're on screen, they don't work for me. And so Peter Ustinov is very big, just very big with Poirot.
And what do you mean?
He acts like, oh, madame, you cannot do that, you are being rude, and whereas David Suchet is like, that was quite rude, madame. You know, so you see, like, they're on 2 different levels.
Yeah, Poirot is a little more low-key.
Yeah. So Poirot in the novel, and then Poirot, as played by David Suchet, is very low-key. He's not going to bring that much attention to himself. He's very soft-spoken, except when he's angry. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's why I didn't particularly care for Peter Ustinov's performance. I don't like Kenneth Branagh's performance because he put on a terrible mustache and a terrible French accent, and it's like, I'm Perot now. And I really enjoyed Kenneth Branagh on other things. I think he's a talented director too. Like, he did his first movie is an adaptation of Henry V, and that is really good. He also did an adaptation of Frankenstein after Coppola's Dracula, and that's really good too. I like that one. Arrow's putting out a 4K, so I'm probably going to get that when that comes out. But I didn't care for his Murder on the Orient Express, so I'm not going to see his Death on the Nile. But it's nice to kind of talk about Agatha Christie and her work, and I'm glad that she's kind of back in the limelight a little bit, even if the movie that they're making of it looks really cartoony.
Well, that's the thing. Even if it's like, even whether a movie's good or bad, it always, like, you know, if it's based off of real people. Never mind. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It's always nice to see it, even though, like, even if it's bad, seeing a property that you love kind of come back.
You never know; it might, like, introduce Agatha Christie to a new generation.
Oh yeah, you know? and they're doing Death on the Nile, which is one of her masterpieces. It's my favorite book from Agatha Christie, period, and one of my favorite books of all time. So I mean, I'm.
Is it you or me?
I think I put down.
Okay.
And so, like, I mean, I'm glad that they're putting a lot of money behind it, I guess. That's kind of cool, but it's also interesting too. I mean, like, I guess I understand it from a financial point of view, but like they're just redoing the ones that they have already brought to the screen with a big budget, instead of doing some of her lesser known ones. Um, which I understand from that financial point of view, but I don't know. And like, to be fair, I think there's a few of the David Suchet episodes where the book is much better, and they could have done a better job, like bringing it to the screen. Not to say that those episodes are bad. It's just they sometimes make choices where I'm like, I don't think you should do that. So Cards on the Table, like we were talking about earlier, they really wanted to do a lounge sequence ending for Cards on the Table, which the novel does not have.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only 4 suspects in the whole novel. I mean, that's kind of part of the premise. And 2 of them die before we get to the end of the book. And then a third of them, they realize it wasn't a murder, it was actually self-defense. But they didn't tell anybody the exact circumstances in order to spare his family.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's the last person is the murderer,
Oh no.
So then the show is like, well, we got to have a lounge sequence, right? So they make sure that the other 2 people don't die. And I'm like, that's a choice that I disagree with. It's a much darker book than it is a TV episode because they did that, because they cut those deaths. And there's a few episodes that are like that. But overall, they did a really fantastic job. And some of them are better than their books. Uno.
Well, I have a question. What do you think is a good book for somebody who's never read Agatha Christie before? What's a good book to start with?
Well, you could start with her first novel, Mysterious Affair at Styles, which is also the first Perot book. Most of her books are short, but it's even shorter than a lot of them. I mean, and if you liked, or like you kind of enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express or whatever, you could start there. The thing is like, there's no real order that you need to start in with them.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I started with Murder in Mesopotamia, and I really enjoyed that one. I recently reread that one and was like, this one's really good. Five Little Pigs, which we just watched that episode, is one of my favorite novels. Cards on the Table, Death on the Nile.
Yep, they're right there.
Yeah. For Miss Marple, though, okay, so Agatha Christie has other detectives other than Perot. Her second most famous one is Miss Marple, who is an elderly spinster who listens to gossip and then basically solves the mystery based on that, usually. There's one book. Hers are... Okay, so there's a big tonal difference between the Miss Marple books and the Perot stories. Like, the Perot ones are usually pretty exciting. There's kind of a lot going on. Miss Marple is usually very slow, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, okay. I mean, granted, both of them are mostly dialogue, but yeah. So I forget the name of this one. I think it was The Mirror Cracked. But like Miss Marple is out walking, and she has an attack or something, and she falls. And so then one of the neighbors sees her and brings her inside, and then they get to talking. and that's like the start of the book. They spend like 20 or 30 pages on it. This is interesting too, looking at Agatha Christie versus oh, wow, already Uno versus Conan Doyle, because I feel like the Sherlock Holmes stories are very there's a lot of running around and doing stuff. Uno still.
I'm out. I think that was the quickest game yet.
I know, right? So with the Conan Doyle stories, there's a lot of running around and doing stuff, and then with Agatha Christie, there's usually more like sitting around and talking, because she basically gives you the interviews with everybody in full.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of repeated information because we got to talk with everybody about everything, and then in between you got to read between the lines of those conversations in order to figure out what's actually going on. And then sometimes Perot will play tricks with people, and it's just interesting. They're very different.
Let me ask you something. Does Agatha Christie write in a way where she will give little clues or hints to the reader so maybe they could figure out, who's responsible for the crime? Or is it, she just sets it up so only Perot can explain to you how?
You could solve them. You have all the clues. You're just not looking at them in the right way.
Uh-huh.
Usually there's one detail that everyone has taken for granted that is wrong. And if you look at it in the exact opposite way, suddenly everything makes sense. So, for example, I'm going to kind of, I'm going to spoil Five Little Pigs, even though I love that one, but I guess skip ahead a few minutes. I don't know how long we're going to talk about it, but so in Five Little Pigs, there's this painter has been murdered, and his wife is hanged for the crime. Then, over a decade later, their daughter comes to Perot and says, "Hey, my mother sent me a note that says she's innocent. She wrote it before she died, and I've just come into my inheritance, and so I got the note." And she's like, "I was hoping you could investigate the crime." And Perot looks into it and realizes that the mistress, the woman that we thought he was going to leave his wife for, he wasn't actually going to leave his wife for her, and so she kills him. And so that's just one example of that was something we take for granted the entire time, but is wrong. And it's always something very simple like that. And then you're like, I can't believe I didn't see it. It was right in front of my face.
Mm-hmm.
Going back for a moment to Miss Marple, I was going to say, if you want to get into Miss Marple, which I have not read all of the Miss Marple books, I don't care for her in the same way I do Perot, and so I haven't read them all yet, but I am working my way through them. The one that really got me into Miss Marple, and the one that was like, okay, I'm actually going to read all of these, is the Tuesday Club Murders. It goes by a couple different titles, so you can Google that. But the Agatha Christie is so funny because they put out so many of her books under different titles. So Murder on the Orient Express, you'd think, oh yeah, that's the perfect title, right? We don't need another title for that book, but it's also called Murder in the Calais Coach. Good luck finding it titled that, but that is an alternate title they used. And that happens a lot with her work. But the Tuesday Club Murders is really fun. She was writing that around the same time as she came up with Perot, and it's really cute, and it works so well to Miss Marple's strengths. So basically, this group is meeting every Tuesday, and they decide that each week they're going to have one person present a murder that they know the solution to. And they're going to present the facts and see if anybody can solve it. And so each week they meet and somebody presents a murder. And Miss Marple solves them all. She's one of the participants sitting there, and she listens to the facts and solves them. And it's so cute. It's such a cute book. I loved it. It's all short stories essentially, but it does kind of read like a novel in the way that like the Canterbury Tales or something kind of reads like a novel, because there's a frame story. And yeah, it's just really fun. So if you want to read Miss Marple, I would say to start with the Tuesday Club Murders, because I actually really like that one, and I don't like all of Miss Marple's books.
Okay.
Are you putting?
Ooh, no.
No. I remember reading At Bertram's Hotel, and oh my god, I hated that one. That was that's one of my least favorite Agatha Christie books. She has some stinkers for sure. I mean, she wrote so many books. Even some of the Perot ones, I'm like, damn, so many. Like the Big Four. You don't need to read the Big Four. I mean, you know, if you want to read all the Perot ones, I guess you have to, but if you're not obsessive like me, you don't need to read the Big Four.
I remember that.
The TV episode is better by virtue of it being only an hour and a half. But yeah, I would say these two authors like really have a they really solidified the mystery genre. I mean, they weren't the originators. Poe and Wilkie Collins would have to come into that conversation, but Sherlock Holmes really took what Poe and Wilkie Collins had come up with and solidified it to the extent that he's the most famous fictional detective of all time. And then Agatha Christie brought in the wonderful puzzle element where you can solve every Agatha Christie story, technically. Like, you're probably not going to solve most of them, but something like Evil Under the Sun, I was like, I have read enough Agatha Christie that I actually was able to figure this one out, because they're just confusing the time of death. And if you realize, hey, maybe she didn't die when we think she did, suddenly you can figure out who did it, you know? And then, you know, I'm not really sure who you would say is like the most famous mystery novelist working today. I feel like it kind of splintered at that point, and now there's a lot of them. I mean, there were other ones working in Agatha Christie's lifetime, and you know, who came up during it and then have continued into the present. But I'm not sure I would say any of them are as famous as these two. I think these two are really foundational to the mystery genre. Which is interesting too, because Doyle wrote a lot of other stories, but he's most famous for Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. I have a collection of his horror stories, actually. Like, did you know he wrote horror stories? I didn't know that until I found the collection, but they're really good. Actually, they're like horror and suspense stories, and they're kind of messed up, some of them. And he wrote The Lost World, which is what Michael Crichton took the title for Jurassic Park 2, which is about like a group of explorers who go to a valley in South America that has dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals in it. He wrote like a lot of stuff. He was a very prolific writer, and I haven't explored. I explored the Sherlock. I've read all the Sherlock Holmes stories, but I haven't read as much of his other stuff. I'm gonna be honest. Some of it I don't really care for. Like The Lost World, I did read, but I didn't particularly like it. Um, I think it was really cute. Like they put in like they took fake pictures to put in there as though it was a real book. So like there's pictures of dinosaurs, there's pictures of Commander Challenger, who's the main character, but it's Arthur Conan Doyle in a fake in a wig and a fake beard. Um, so yeah, I mean, I I don't know. I just think they're both really fun, um, and yeah, I mean they're both influential to my writing and my. I just love reading them.
Yeah, you know a lot.
Well, anything else we should talk about? Or?
I can't think of anything else unless there's anything left you'd like to talk about.
I can't think of anything. I mean, with Agatha Christie especially, I'm still working my way through her books, which I'm no longer rushing because she's dead. So like, there's only a finite number of books I can read from her. Um, but every time I do like go back and like read some new ones or reread some of the old ones, I always find something new to think about and talk about with that. Like, I think that was one of the reasons I kind of held off on this one. I mean, I guess this is only our third episode, but it's been a year now since we've been doing these.
Yeah, don't worry.
We'll
Try to post these kind of videos more often.
Yeah, we'll try and do them more. I don't know. I get very much in my head like I need to be an expert on everything, and I'm like, if I'm an expert on any one author, it's probably going to be Agatha Christie. Because I mean, this isn't even all of her books that I have that I've read, and I sold a lot of them.
There's more.
Oh yeah, I sold a lot of them, like the big four. That I was like, I'm never gonna read this one again. It's funny though. The books do have kind of a continuity because they'll mention previous cases. So it is kind of funny how that happens. But so there's a loose continuity that if you've read them all in the publication order, you might notice, which I didn't do. I read them in random order, except for I saved Curtain for last because Hercule Poirot dies in Curtain. Agatha Christie actually had the idea for that book. I think sometime in the 50s. And she was like, I can't publish this right now. But when I'm done with the character, this will be the final one. And so she kept it in a drawer for many years.
Mm.
And then she published it in the last year of her life.
Also, she published right up until the end, huh?
Oh yeah. And Hercule Poirot is, at least at the time, I don't know if anything has happened since, but he was the only fictional character to get an obituary in the New York Times.
Really?
Yeah.
A fictional character got an obituary?
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. I don't want to spoil it, but it's so interesting where she takes Poirot's character in that last novel, and it makes you look back at the rest of them and be like, and I don't know. I guess she has a really like her themes are very interesting, and I think one of the big ones would be anyone could become a murderer under the right circumstances, and I mean the like puzzle like nature of her plots are. People sometimes joke about them. I mean, like Knives Out is kind of like making fun of it and it's its own commentary on that sort of structure, which became a cliche because she invented it and like made it so popular. But I think that that is kind of the kernel of truth at the bottom of everything, is that she has created a web of characters that at least one of whom is squeezed to the point where they decide they are going to commit an act of violence and try and get away with it. And I think that speaks to a deeper part of human nature. Um, it's interesting to see how everyone reacts to that, because some people are mad at the inconvenience and the fact that they're suspected of maybe having committed a crime, and then a lot of people just want to try and help and do the right thing. Um, and it speaks to something that I think she must have seen within her lifetime. I mean, she lived through two world wars on the front lines of one of them, basically. Um, I think, when you go through something like that, which is, an event that affects basically everybody on Earth,
Hmm.
like,
Kind of like what we're going through
yeah,
right
yeah,
now with the
yeah,
pandemic.
exactly. You get an insight into human nature that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily get. Um, and I mean, I think we are experiencing that right now. And she's able to capture that. Um, and so, I mean, like, not all of her books have characters that I would be like, yeah, those people are three dimensional. I mean, a lot of them are definitely like, these are just puzzle pieces for you
Mhm.
to put together. But some of them, like Five Little Pigs or Death on the Nile, they portray the true tragedy of murder. Like the how it breaks the lives of the people around them. Um, and it's interesting because she is very sentimental at heart. Like she often will have a member of the family be murdered, and then obviously their family is suspects, but then it turns out to be somebody who's outside of the family who did it, so that the family is not broken a second time. Um, and so it's interesting seeing that the exposure of man's darker nature, while at the same time having the optimism that justice will be done. Because Perot always saw, like any of her detectives, they always solved the case. And it's very rare that there's only a few instances where the murder is not like, the murderer isn't going to be hanged for it, or in some way punished. Um, so it's just an interesting dichotomy to look at, because I feel like she captures both sides of the coin. The pessimistic, like the emotional state that someone has to be in to decide I am going to kill somebody that I know, and the I'm going to help in any way that I can, even though I don't benefit from doing so, um, side of humanity. And I just think that's beautiful. I mean, like, because both are part of human nature.
Hmm.
Um, and the fact that she's able to bring that to the page in a genre story is great. I mean, like that's one of the things I love about genre. And I don't just like I read a lot. I don't read just one specific genre, but I love the best. I love who I love at the top of each genre. And there's always something that I'm like, yeah, that's why I want to keep reading. There's some nugget in there. And I think that that's what it is for Agatha Christie, is is the her being able to capture both sides of the darkness and the light inside the human heart, and bring that out. And she's also very easy to read, and it's just always a lot of fun.
Hmm.
And they're not long books.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, We've been
Yeah.
doing this for a little over an hour now. I think we should cut it off
Yeah.
unless there's anything more you missed.
I don't think so. Well,
All right,
thank you for
well.
listening to my rambling.
See you next time, guys. Remember to brush and floss daily.
It's gonna be your spay and neuter.
No, that was Bob Barker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's gonna be your catchphrase.
I got to do something different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just went to the dentist today, so that's probably why I said that. But it is important. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.